Alright, today we're going to be looking at ellipses, which we have our two standards here. One, we're going to graph them, and we're going to write the equations of them given information. So we're going to be able to take an equation and pull it apart, and we're going to take given information, we're going to be able to put it back into an equation. Alright, so given the equation of an ellipse, how can we graph it? First, let's look at some definitions of an ellipse. Ellipse is a set of all points where the sum of the distance from the foci is constant. Now, foci, will be on the major axis. The major axis on which the foci lie, the long axis of symmetry, which is the long axis of symmetry. So in this case, our major axis is here. Then our minor axis, which is the shorter axis of symmetry, would be here. Now, we're going to look at two forms of the equation. Our first form here is a horizontal ellipse. Here we have x minus h squared over a squared plus y minus k squared over b squared. Now, we're going to start out with examples where the center is at the origin, so h and k will both be 0. So what we'll end up with for our equation will simply be x squared. We'll end up with x squared over a squared plus y squared over b squared is equal to 1. So that would be our horizontal ellipse here. A squared is always bigger than b squared. Now, we're also going to be able to find the foci. The foci is going to be negative c and positive c. Now, to find c is simply going to be a squared minus b squared. And that'll give us c squared. So then we would take the square root to find the foci, and we'll come up with that. Now again, h and k will typically be 0. Well, it is 0 at the origin. Now, our vertical ellipse here, we have x minus h squared over b squared plus y minus k squared. Y minus k squared over a squared is equal to 1. Now, again, if we're at the origin, the h and the k are 0, so we'll end up with x squared over b squared plus y squared over a squared is equal to 1. Remember, your bigger value is always a. And so we have two forms of the equation where this would be a vertical ellipse and then the other one would be a horizontal ellipse. Now let's look at an example of where we would actually graph one. So here, let me move this out of the way, we have x squared over 36 plus y squared over 16. And we're told to find the vertices, the co-vertices, and the foci, and then sketch a graph. The vertices, again, is always going to be the bigger of the two values, but we're going to so that's always a squared is always your vertices. So a squared is equal to 36. So that means a is equal to plus or minus 6. Now in this case, we have it underneath x squared, so that means that our vertices will be plus or minus 6, 0. Now the 0 comes from the fact that we're at the origin and there's no h and k value listed, so that means that we're at the origin. Alright, so that's our vertices. Now our co-vertices will come from b. Now b squared is equal to 16, remembering that b is always the smaller of the two values. It doesn't matter if it's listed underneath the x squared or the y squared, but wherever the smaller value is, the b value. So now we take the square root of both sides, so we get b is equal to plus or minus 4. Now it's in the y, underneath the y, so we'll have 0 plus or minus 4. Now let's go ahead and find the foci, and then we'll graph our ellipse. Now with this, to find the foci, it's going to be c squared is equal to a squared minus b squared. It's always a squared minus b squared so that we don't end up with a negative number. So we end up with c squared is equal to a squared, which was 36, so it would be 36 minus 16. And so c squared is equal to 20. Take the square root. It's not a perfect square, so we end up with c is equal to plus or minus. Now this will break apart to 4 and 5. So I'm going to take the square root of that to be 2, square root of 5. So our foci is 2 square root of 5. Now remembering that our foci is always on our major axis, so it's always on the same, it'll always either be x, in this case it'll be x value because it's on the same place as our vertices. So we'll have plus or minus 2 square root of 5 and 0. So we found the vertices, the co-vertices, and the foci. Now, to graph it, what we'll do is I'm going to graph plus or minus 6. I'm going to go over here, I'm going to put a point at negative 6 and positive 6, because again, that's in the x value. Now I'm going to go up to 4 and down to 4. Okay, and so that's our points. Now we could just kind of draw it in, but hopefully to make it a little bit cleaner, what I'm going to do is just go to Tools here, and I'm going to Shapes, and see if I get this to come out right. And that right there is the graph of our ellipse. Now our foci will be 2 square root of 5, which is we don't actually have to graph it, but our foci, it's gonna, if you did this in your calculator, it'd be 4.4 something. So we'd be somewhere in here for our foci, and somewhere here. And so we have graphed an ellipse, and we have come up with the vertices, the co-vertices, and the foci.